Welcome to another episode of Bacon Bashers, and this video is got to be the king of the Bacon Bashers, which I'm going to refer to him as Sir Robert Maudsley. So Robert Maudsley, who is now 71-year-old, has got the title King of the Bacon Bashers for the simple fact that he has killed single-handedly 4 bacons. So that is what I'm going to be talking about in this episode, people. But before I get into it, just for the algorithm to get this video up there, please go ahead and hit the like button and comment and subscribe. So Robert Maudsley was born in Speke, Liverpool in 1953, making him now 71 years old. He has spent 41 years in solitary confinement. But in total, he has been in prison for 50 years, 41 in the block. Well, 41 years in the CSU unit, which is in HMP Wakefield, also known as Monster Mansion. So Robert Maudsley has a very sad story. From a young age, or from being a young child, he was neglected by his parents. And he did go on to state that whilst he was under the age of 12, his father had actually hairy aped him. Now, anyone who's new to the channel, I use different slang terms on here, what they use in prison. As you can imagine, sensitive content like this is a bit tricky to get wrong. So when I say hairy ape, it rhymes with, and when I say bacon, bacon is a nonce, which is slang prison term, or should I say a prison slang. It's not Cockney rhyming slang, it's prison. Inside a jail, if someone is a nonce, they get referred to as a bacon. So Robert Maudsley was brutally harried by his own father. So as you can imagine, this is what has sent him on this path of destruction and wanting to harm bacons. He's wanting to get back at bacons for what happened to him as a child, which anyone in a right mind can sympathise with this. If you have been mistreated like that by your own father and abused as a child, then it's fair game. You're going to be looking for people who are harming other kids and wanting to act out your own justice. But people who I've spoke to who have actually had interactions with Robert Maudsley in the CSU in Wakefield actually refer to him as Bob. He is known to his mates as Bob, so I will start referring to him as Bob as I go on through this video. So Bob committed his first murder in 1974, and his first victim, his first bacon, was John Farrell. So John Farrell was 30 at the time, and Bob was around about 19. And he was actually working as an S worker down in London. Obviously, the way that he's been brought up, he's living on the streets and obviously being abused from a young age. It's probably, in his mind, become normal. So he was actually working as an S worker down in London when he come across John Farrell. But John Farrell began to show him photographs of young kids. He was showing him explicit photos of young kids, and obviously he didn't like what he seen, so he then went on to kill the bacon, John Farrell, on sight, ending his life there and then by garrotting him. Bob actually went and handed himself in to the police, told them what he'd done, seeking help because he needed psychiatric help. That's when they then put him into Broadmoor Mental Hospital. But in 1977, just a few years later, he and another inmate called David Cheeseman took another prisoner hostage, or another patient, because they weren't referred to as prisoners when they were inside a hospital. So they took another patient hostage inside the pad. So this other patient was another bacon called David Francis, who was in for those type of offences. They took a dislike to him, and it did go on to say, and I've done a bit of research into this, that there was a homophobic attack against one of their friends inside the hospital, and they didn't like what Francis had done. So him and Cheeseman took him into the pod, took him hostage, tortured him for 9 hours, and brutally murdered him inside the hospital. But David Cheeseman himself was actually a bacon, so I'm surprised Maudsley became friends with him, unless he didn't know his background. He might have said he was in for something else, because I'm assuming if he knew what he was in for, he probably would have took his life in that cell as well. But because he was in a hospital and he was deemed unwell, he actually got a manslaughter for that murder. But instead of keeping him in the hospital, where you would think if he's been deemed unfit and he's been charged with manslaughter instead of murder, you would have thought they would have kept him in a hospital to give him further help. But they actually sent him to HMP Wakefield, where it's full of beasts. HMP Wakefield, also known as Monster Mansion, is a predominantly bacon prison for those type of offenders. So if they knew what Bob was all about, was it their plan to get rid of more bacons? So they went on and sent Sir Bob, King of the Bacon Bashers, into HMP Wakefield, surrounded by beasts. So in 1978, he took prison justice out, took it to the extreme, and took it to the next level, where he committed 2 murders within hours of each other. The first one was Salney Darwood, another bacon. Maudsley invited Darwood into his own pad, where he strangled him, stabbed him, and choked him under the bed. Then he was standing at the door, inviting other prisoners into his pad, but no one would go anywhere near, because they must have knew what had just happened, and none of them would come in the pad with Maudsley. So the next bacon victim was William Roberts, who was 56-year-old, who was in for vile offences against a 7-year-old. On his bed, Maudsley went into his pad, stabbed him up and hacked away at his head, smashed his head off the wall until he was dead. But this is where he got the nickname Hannibal the Cannibal, because this fourth victim who he killed, or fourth bacon who he ended his life, he actually, when it says he smashed his head off the wall, stabbed him up, and his brain was popping out. And this is where he got a nickname inside of prison as Spoons. I'm assuming the knife that he used to stab him up with was the other end of a spoon, because as you can imagine, the hard plastic spoons in prison can be sharp down on the other end, and he was supposed to have been seen with a spoon in his hand, and the other inmates were making stories up saying he was eating his brains, so he got the nickname Spoons and Hannibal the Cannibal. But he went into the office with the dagger in his hand, and he said to the screws, "They'll be too short for roll call tonight." So obviously the screws went to check it out and seen that there was 2 less for roll call, getting caught off the wings in body bags, 2 less bacons in the prisons and on the streets. So in total, that was Maudsley's 4 victims. But as you can imagine, the prison service didn't want this to be happening again, so they had Maudsley down as no contact with any other human being. So they put him inside of a cage in the underground of HMP Wakefield, which is the CSU. Now, there is multiple online articles stating that Robert Maudsley is in a glass cage in the underground of HMP Wakefield. Well, this is actually false, because I have actually had interactions with people who have actually seen him in the CSU, people that have been in there, and there was an ex-screw sent us an email and told us all about the conditions that Bob is living in. He is in a cell in the CSU where he isn't allowed any other interactions with anybody else. He can't go out on association. He is allowed out on exercise, as you can imagine. He still gets his exercise, but he can't have contact with any other humans inside of HMP Wakefield. The only interactions that he does have is when he's talking to other lads who are out on the exercise yard, because his cell is facing the exercise yard, so he does have interactions talking out of the windows. But for 41 years, he has been kept inside that cell so that he does not commit any more murders. But he has gone on to talk about life inside of that cell for 41 years and said it is absolute torture the way they've got him in there, these living conditions, that he's not allowed any contact. After all these years, he should be allowed some form of contact. He is only a threat to bacons and beasts. He did go on to say if they wouldn't give him access or exercise with other inmates or association with other people or put him back on a normal location wing, you might as well give me a cyanide capsule so he can end it, because that's how stark and depraved his life is at the moment, or for the past 41 years, stuck in solitary confinement with no other human contact whatsoever. But Bob did receive a life sentence without the possibility of parole, meaning he will never be released from prison. But he's now 71-year-old, and he can die knowing that he has the name on my channel as King of the Bacon Bashers. Sir Robert Maudsley, your name will not go in vain. And I'm assuming everybody watching this can take a little bit of humour out of it when I'm coming on like this. But on a serious note, he has suffered for what he's done, but he has had a horrible, miserable life from the day he was born. He was mistreated, negatively brought up by, well, you wouldn't even call it brought up, dragged up by disgusting parents and abused by his own father in the most wicked ways. So you couldn't, or you don't wonder at it how he ended up like this, living this nightmare of a life that he's lived and inflicting his own justice on other sick, depraved bacons. But I will leave that one there for now, people. Hopefully you are enjoying the content. And if you are, remember to comment, like and subscribe. But there will be plenty more videos coming. And if there is any that you would like us to make, drop it in the comment section and let us know your thoughts. Take care, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.